Last week or a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Crash, the Cronenberg film, and we were talking about the element of obsession and obsessiveness. And we got into an area of conversation where it was like, okay, obsessiveness, um, and kind of these hierarchies of obsessiveness where it's like, well, if you're obsessed with sex and car crashes, then you're a fucking freak, or you're a pervert, or you're whatever. Or maybe you're just a fetishist. So however you describe it, you're that.
Hmm.
If you're obsessed with basketball and you're able to make money off of that, then you're not a freak. You're talented, or you're the best basketball player in the world, or you're Michael Jordan, or you're whatever the fuck. Um, and a lot of times, being able to make a living at your obsession, that's the difference between that makes all the difference in the world. Tonight, we're going to talk about um, a person who could be considered a fetishist, a freak, whatever, not into sex and car crashes, but into other things. But this person has also managed to be successful at his artwork, at his obsessiveness, at his obsessions. This person is Robert Crumb. Tonight, we're discussing the documentary about him, about his family, about his the women in his life, the big-legged women in his life, his comic books, from Fritz the Cat to Keep on Trucking, um, all of it tonight. Terry Zwigoff's documentary, Crumb.
I don't know of another documentary. I don't know of another film that deals with obsessiveness in every aspect in a way that Zwigoff's film does. You have the contrast between brothers who are
Mm-hmm.
compulsive and obsessive, and how that whittles away at their minds and their souls, leaving them, I don't know what you would call them, shells of human beings, um, mental cases is a disposable description. Um, People that are obsessed with Robert Crumb's work in the public, but also Terry Zwigoff himself, director of this film, who spent, I think, 9 years making this film, and at and for a 6 year period of this filmmaking process was in such intense back pain that he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He just couldn't bring himself to actually do it. So both the subject matter, the world that it's set in, and the making of this film are obsession. Um, I don't know that I've ever seen a film that better captured that level of personal self-destruction, but also personal achievement, as you see in this film. This film is I haven't seen this film in a long time, and I pulled it off the shelf. I remember seeing it in college in Chicago, and this was '94, right?
Um, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have been either a sophomore or a junior. I think it was a junior, and a friend of mine had seen it as well, and he said it was the most disturbing thing he'd ever seen, and he didn't want to watch it again. He never wanted to watch it. He was kind of pissed off at himself for having seen it. That tells me that
Mm.
there's a certain level of baggage that he carried into it, because it didn't affect me that way. It just I was affected from an outsider's point of view. So it was like, wow. Um, it kind of it opened me up to a world, and have you ever felt like you're on the street and you're looking at somebody and you know that motherfucker isn't right,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no way of really knowing the backstory there. This film is that backstory. You know what I mean?
Look at the president, and I see a
Yeah.
incoming.
Yeah. This
I know
is.
the backstory, but yeah.
I mean, you rode the bus for years in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
You've seen this story many times. I look at these people. I look at Charles Crumb. I look at Maddox. Is it Maddox? Mackin. Is it, what is his name? Maxon. Yeah, Maxon.
Well, Max for short. Yeah.
And I see these people that exist around Robert Crumb. Robert Crumb, who is problematic a subject in his own right,
Mm-hmm.
but is a
functioning member of society.
In respects to them, yeah.
He's also, I mean, he's the most well-adjusted of them.
If the contrast wasn't available to you, would you feel that?
Yes, because he's able. I mean, he's.
Well, I guess he's successful in his business as far as,
and he lives a life where he goes outside and
Mm-hmm.
he goes into the world and he interacts with the world. He's eccentric and he has his problematic, I guess is a way to put it. Controversial, whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
He's not dysfunctional in that his eccentricities and his
Mm-hmm.
hang-ups and his whatever issues he's have, they don't prevent him from living his life. Whereas the other two, well, Charles committed suicide a year after the filming of this.
No, successfully committed suicide. Because he
had already attempted
yeah.
before, yeah. So this time he actually committed it.
Yeah.
And he was the one that. So Charles Crumb is this. Let's go back. So Charles Crumb is a comic artist, and I don't know a lot about him. I think I've seen this. This is probably the third time that I've seen this documentary.
You're talking about Charles Crumb, or you're talking about Robert Crumb now?
I'm stepping back, so I'm saying Robert Crumb,
mm-hmm.
the central
character,
subject,
Robert Crumb. Okay, yeah.
The subject of this documentary is
mm-hmm.
a comic artist who started in the 60s as a kind of countercultural comic voice.
Yeah.
He gained popularity with Keep on Truckin'. It's like that's like kind of one of the main ones that
that hangs
at this
around
point
his neck.
Kind of disappeared. But yeah, it's that, Fritz the Cat, other things. He said that he took psychedelics and his style changed, and it opened him up to all these other things. And then he was famous in the underground and for his comic drawings and in these like zines and magazines and publications and stuff. And then from there, he started to draw things that were more personal, particularly much more like fantasy based in terms of his sexual fetishism
mm-hmm.
towards women with large legs. And from there, he gained more and more popularity. Through the documentary, you learn that he grew up in an abusive household where it was him, two brothers and two sisters. In this film, the sisters do not participate. The brothers do. His brother Charles was the one who kind of got the siblings into comics to begin with, and he was the original artist. So they would draw and they would create their own comic books, and they have this massive, like, Robert Crumb has all of these comic books from their childhood mm-hmm. that they created.
Yeah.
Like full on fucking comic books.
Well,
like
these are full projects. These are actual books. Yeah.
Yes.
Comparable to anything that is published. They were doing that at a young age. Yeah, it's very impressive.
that they would be committed to that. Charles is filmed. He still, at that point, he still lived with his mother. Well, he lived his whole life basically in his mother's home. His mother, the mother herself, I don't know if she's still alive or not at the point in the film, is an eccentric herself, has all these like cats. Don't be triggered, Leslie. Or any cat ladies or whatever fucking JD Vance fucking attacks people with. But she's like, there's cat lady, and then there's fucking like that type, like hangs blankets from the wall, like not tapestries, not kind of like. Mm-hmm. There's different ways. Like if you were like in a hippie house and you had like fucking fabrics hanging from the wall, that's different. This is like. They're like comforters and shit that are like stapled to the walls.
Yeah, shutting out the world, shutting out the light.
Everything's fucking like super dirty.
Mm-hmm. Hoarding and yeah.
Yeah, like it just gives it a different vibe where it gives it feels more like a hoarder type of house. And the brother Charles is very disheveled, unkempt. He himself says that he only showers, and everything is kind of like a joke to him. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how he like deflects, and he says he only showers like once every 6 weeks, and it looks like that, and they look like they smell. And it's fucked up because I'm watching this and I'm fucking judging so fucking hard as I'm watching this film, and I was gonna eat while I was watching this. And I was like, nah. It just, I was like, no, I'm gonna pass. And I felt bad, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, and because I felt like he smelled, and like the house smelled, and it was like almost like I could smell it, but you know, obviously you can't. But it felt that like there was something grimy to it, like different in the way, like Nick Broomfield, the documentarian. We did Port and Courtney. We did
something in Bleach or something. We did that.
No. Soaked in Bleach is a different Nirvana documentary about Kurt Cobain.
Okay, we did the Hollywood Madam one. That was his.
Yeah, so we did Kurt and Courtney, which is Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love from Nick Broomfield, and we did the Heidi Fleiss one. That's the one you're talking about. Yeah. And you talked about, this is years ago, and you said that you felt like dirty.
Oh yeah.
And this guy does like very guerrilla filmmaking. He goes in with the fucking boom mic and all this shit. He goes in, he's part of it. He's like gonzo journalism. That's a certain kind of like grittiness. This was like, I really felt like I was in that house.
Yeah.
And I like wanted to open up a window and like stick my head out. And so Charles, at that point, he was on all these medications. He had all these like mental health issues. I read separately that he had described himself as having homo pedophilic tendencies.
Charles did.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But he had never acted out on that, so he would like struggle to not act out on that. And he had urges in their childhood. He had urges to get up in the middle of the night and kill Robert, to stab him or to kill him with an axe. And it's revealed in the documentary that Charles Crumb was obsessed with and attracted to the little boy from Treasure Island. And so he has all of these like comic books centered around Treasure Island, and it was kind of like sparked by this crush. Well, in the film they describe it as a crush, but this kind of like infatuation with the boy from, I don't know if it was a show or a movie, I guess it was a show.
I think it was a movie. I think it was a Disney film.
Was it a film?
Mm-hmm.
This boy, and you learn that he ends up, and he has all this like resentment and all this shit towards Robert, and then they show some of his artworks, his comics, and he got into this like, they're really interesting. They're his drawings have, he's using all these like lines and this kind of what Robert Crumb described as a wrinkle technique, and then he got this into Robert Crumb describes it as a graphomania, that's kind of like obsessiveness with writing, but not necessarily like his drawings went from, his comics went from like images with a little bit of dialogue and a little bit of description.
As a comic book normally would be, but.
As a comic, as it normally would be, but with a particular kind of like squiggly line technique for all the clothes and the trees and everything. And then slowly, they become wordier and wordier to where you have like only 5% or 10% of each like box in the comic. Only that part is drawn in with like an image. The rest is all like it's all prose.
Yeah.
And then he got into he would just like do like squiggly lines like in a note, and he would fill a notebook with this stuff. And I thought that was interesting because I have like a version of that, where like I don't consider myself to be fucked up on that level. And I've always been like a person that like would fill up notebooks with like lists and ideas and all this shit, and actual writing as well.
Yeah.
But even like some people doodle, I like to, and I don't do it a lot, but I've had periods where I've done it more, where I'll have notebooks that have like fonts or different versions of like letters. So it in a sense they're kind of like practicing fonts or stylized words or whatever, almost like a sketchbook, what for lines and words.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really interesting because it all ties into like obsession and like what you're working on, and also just kind of like the whole family, everyone around Robert Crumb draws.
Well, the two brothers we know. We don't know what the sisters were. Oh,
his kids,
yeah.
His wife.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like all these satellites spinning around him. Yeah. His other brother, Max, lives in this, at the time of the filming, lives in this rundown fucking San Francisco.
It's like a Skid Row hotel. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like a Skid Row type hotel. He uses a bed of nails that he sits on. He lives this ascetic type of life, and like a Hindu ascetic. He goes outside every day for a period with a beggar's bowl. He there's this Hindu, like this yogic kind of technique where you swallow a string and you let the string pass through your body as a way of like a cleansing.
Mm-hmm. A 3-day process for it to.
He does that, yeah. And they show him like he has this fucking string down his throat, and he's like sipping water to pass it, and eventually it's gonna pass through his body, and it's gonna come out the other end, and he does that. He describes in this offhand, just kind of way, and Robert Crumb is just kind of like laughing, and that like Charles Crumb's laughter when he talks about crazy shit is like deflecting. Robert Crumb's is kind of like there's that aspect to it, but it's also kind of like there is a distancing there, but it's kind of like I don't know what else to do, but
Yeah.
it in a sense it's kind of like, oh, I'm just laughing it off. Um, but he even describes his mother's house as all fucked up. He's just like, yeah, like how he just describes how weird it is, but it's kind of like there's some level of like this is the life of those around me, but I distance myself from it, even though I'm from that myself. Um, his brother Max describes molesting women.
Yeah.
And
And
Crumb is
in a
like,
weird way kind of qualifies it because it's like, you got to molest for a couple of years before you start raping.
you're
I thought
right.
that shit was like, it was so matter of fact, the shit that, this movie is so matter of fact in the shit that is being said and the way they've just, not necessarily embraced, but have grown to accept their eccentricities and their mental issues, because all three of these guys know that they're fucked up.
Fucked
The
up.
mother
Yeah.
is the only one that doesn't seem to know that she's fucked up, you know?
Or at
And
least that's the way she's presenting it.
yeah, yeah. I found
I
that
mean,
to be, yeah. Go ahead. I'm
it
sorry.
hints at like, the father was abusive.
Yeah.
So like you get a sense that like it was one of those households where all kinds of shit went on and the mom was in denial.
Yeah.
We can speculate as to, we can fill in those blanks, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the way we fill them is correct. All we know is that he was physically abusive in terms of like violence
Mm-hmm.
and verbal
Well,
abuse.
violence, verbal abuse based on the expectations that he had for his children. He wanted them to be tougher. He wanted them to be athletes.
50s
And they,
bullshit.
yeah, 50s bullshit. And they turned out to be sensitive, artistic, and physically weak. So this was, it was disturbing in a weird way.
Yeah. So, well, there's one, and I'm really kind of like diving into these
Yeah.
characters to present like to basically gross you out as a listener, just to get a sense of like what it's like to watch this, and to really kind of like understand each person
Yeah.
as a person. Even though I'm saying, okay, Charles, this, Maxon sits on a fucking bed of nails, passes a string through his body every every so often, uses a beggar's bowl, also paints, talks about molesting women,
Mm-hmm.
any sexual desire or sexual feelings, it would induce an epileptic seizure in him.
Yeah.
So basically, he learned to suppress any of that, and that's part of his like asceticism. Um, and but he talks about seeing this woman at the store, and she had like these really like short shorts,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't help it, and so he just pulled her shorts all the way down, to reveal, in his words, an ass that was like a ripe peach. And Robert Crumb is just kind of like just laughing, and he's I don't know if did you see the camera pans down
Yeah.
to
To
his
the
hand,
hand. Looked
and
like he
he's
was
like,
jerking off.
yeah, he has this like tick where he's
Mm-hmm.
talking, but what he's doing is he's rattling something in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you noticed that.
No, that I didn't notice. I thought he was
It's a
having like an
bullet.
epileptic thing or something.
He has a fucking bullet that he
Yes,
just
I did see that. I did see the bullet, and I was wondering, well, what happened to the bullet? What the fuck? Oh my god!
yeah, and he's talking about uh this like sexual assault basically, where he
Mm-hmm.
pulls this woman's shorts down, and and he's doing this like tick with his right hand, where pretend you have a bullet in your hand and you're just kind of like bouncing your hand around, rattling it in your hand, but it's by your crotch, and so it looks like he's simulating masturbation, but he's rattling, he's rolling around a fucking bullet in his hand.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff is happening. He's just telling this story in a matter of fact way, kind of like semi amused. And he's like talking about how he's distanced himself from that behavior because it's so animal and so whatever. And so you go from like that to seeing Crumb talk with his son, his like young adult son. They're drawing. That relationship is like, you can tell it's strained, but it's mostly like all they talk about is like drawing. Um, his daughter, he has a young daughter who he seems to like care for. She's drawing. And he's just kind of like, he seems to go through the world with this like, he has it at arm's length, and he just kind of laughs at everything, including himself, including how fucked up he is. Because anytime anyone brings up anything about his artwork, and particularly like his drawings of women and the way he depicts women, and also the way he depicts African Americans, and this idea of like nigger hearts, which in his comics, like it's like this, it's as if there's this product, this canned food, and they're nigger hearts. That's what it's called. And he's just like, I don't know where it comes from. He just kind of laughs, and he just kind of like, so you're presented with him, you're presented with these relatives of his, then you're presented with like an art critic and people who are now giving presentations or interpretations of his work, and how, you know, they're praising his work they're doing a critique, but they're also describing his artwork as a social critical critique of consumerism, of American culture. Then you have these women who he's dated, and including his wife, and you're seeing all his, like, he's married, but you're seeing all his like these exes at galleries and in different interviews, and he's fucking like just kind of like offhanded, like, okay, whatever, laughing. They're just talking about stuff, but then he'll like be all touchy feely with them, and
yeah, it was weird. It had a weird vibe to it. Like there was like these women disliked him but were captivated by him. There was something about him that drew them into his realm, where maybe it's they loved. There were a number of these women. There was one woman at least who said that his drawing of her validated her. You remember that? Because I mean, these are big. I guess the way to call them is big haunched women. These are women with big ass legs, and the way he depicts them in the comic books are not the regular American standard of beauty. He likes bigger women, and these are a number of women out there that are built like this, and it's there was a sense that his drawing and his fetishizing of them in a way made them feel important, and you know, like sexually valuable and beautiful. So there's a place for me, somewhere, and I think there's that, but there's also a sense of I think they view him as this like stunted like kid, this man boy. To a degree, you get that impression,
and they're also like, so they're not threatened by him, even though he may come off as a creep. He's like, he's a creep, but he's a little creep. And they describe, I mean, there's one woman who's an ex who does a photo shoot. She runs these different porn magazines.
Leg work and
jugs and all this other shit. She goes into this thing where she's like, well, you know, women often feel threatened by men, and so one of the areas
we've talked about that,
and one of the areas where women can take back power is through sexuality. and she describes how she's like, according to her analysis of it, men who are attracted to the upper body tend to be more outgoing.
Yes.
Um,
No, but
men,
he said athletic. She said athletic and dominating, didn't she? The upper
I
body.
don't remember if she said
Basically,
that. I
she
don't.
was talking about the difference between breast men and leg ass men. And if I remember correctly, breast men were a little bit more domineering and
Extroverted,
athletic.
yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, more assertive, blah blah,
Hmm.
according to her. And then the way she describes it is that if it's and she didn't say breasts versus ass. She said
Hmm.
upper body,
Yes.
lower body.
Yes.
Um, and she goes to lower body and she basically paints the picture of the fixation on the lower body being coming from a place of like a boy, a scared boy who basically is clinging to his mother's legs or looking up at the
Hmm.
tower of the mother or the tower of mommy. I think she describes it that way. Um, and and they're cutting between these different women talking about what his sex life is like. Um, and his wife, who's an artist, I think she died a couple years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
2022.
she she's like, well, it's a lot of piggyback rides.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, and
They
his
show him
own, right?
piggyback
Like,
riding a woman too. I
oh, they do, yeah.
think more
Um,
than a couple.
and it's like and he likes to do piggyback rides, and he likes to be like focused on me and non-existent. She said.
Yeah.
Um, and then at one point they bring up the fact that he's like all touchy feely with these other women, and she's like, "What do I care that he messes around with other women?" She's like, "I mess around with other guys."
Yeah.
Um, and they're in the process of moving to France, because he's selling like a collection of these early drawings.
Hmm. His early
Um,
notebooks. He doesn't seem
yeah,
happy about it, but at the same time, I don't know. He seems like he's kind of in a weird way floating through life based on what that wife wants. But he's he's but he's also like a slave to his own. He called it proclivities, which when I saw that, I heard him say it. I was like, oh shit! I was saying proclivities a lot in the Crash episode. This is
mm,
where I got it from, the sexual proclivities, because I don't think I had ever heard it used that way before. This film kind of hit you with that. Yeah, they're getting ready to move to France because there's a certain disgust for America and American culture.
which I mean, I get it.
I get it, but at the same time, I don't imagine. I had a friend of mine who was talking about leaving the country, and it was in large part because of what's going on here right now, the Trump thing. And I said, I understand why, but it seems to me that you can't go anywhere in the world without the big foot of the United States pressing down on the culture and the attitude of a lot of places. You would be able to speak to that more blatantly than me, but I find it hard to believe that you could go anywhere in this world without.
Evidence of America
Yeah.
without Mark.
Yeah, I don't think. My point is, I don't think that anywhere else in this world is going to be what you think it's going to be, because the power of the United States is so great that it's just impossible to get away from. Now he moved to a small village in France,
Mm-hmm.
so he moved to it sounded to me. Well, in '97, in '94, there wouldn't have been a Starbucks there. There wouldn't have been a
Right. Well, that's the
but
thing. It's like,
that's the thing, that shit eventually gets there. And what I found fascinating, I'd like to hear what you say, but there was that moment, and it's one of my favorite parts of the film where he says the history of America or something in drawings,
oh
and
yeah, and it's
it's
like
this
the
field.
trees.
It's a what?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it
field with
starts
trees
off
and
as a
everything.
field. Yeah,
and then
and
it
it
just,
becomes like this changing, ever
yeah,
changing street corner.
yeah. And I found that moment fascinating. And there were elements like that were, there's so much about this that I find overwhelming. His art, his family, his sexuality, or at least his fetishes, how that manifests itself into his art. Um, and I've never looked into his artwork. I've never looked at one of his comic books. I've never looked up the extent of my knowledge of his artwork comes from this movie. And I think he did a couple of Bukowski chapbooks, which I own.
Mm.
I own a couple of those. But other than that, I really don't know his work all that well. Do you? Are you?
No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
and I'm not particularly interested. I mean, like to
The movie doesn't. The movie itself doesn't motivate that for you.
I mean, like I'm interested in, like, to the extent that I would like go to the library and
Mhm.
like check out a book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That I'll look at images online or something, but that I would like purchase. Not really.
No, that's a different thing. Yeah, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying with that.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like H.R. Giger. I have books on H.R. Giger's work. I have,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that is like more interesting to me. I would rather read a book on Crumb's life than really try to like have a coffee table book of his work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's one of those things that it's depending on the person. Uh, Going back to the moving abroad, trying to
Mhm.
get away from the thing. It's like, well, yeah. I mean, look, you're Leslie was telling me about this theory of the third place, um, and I'm doing it like super third hand at this point. So I might. It's how I interpreted whatever she was telling me. That's how I understood it.
Mhm.
She what? I don't.
No, it's just Leslie.
I mean,
I
she's
love
talking about.
Leslie. I'm just saying. She
It's
makes
this
me laugh.
idea.
I'm sorry.
It's,
Go ahead.
it's this idea of when you travel, it's this third place. It's not home and it's not work.
Mhm.
It's outside of your regular world, and so there's an enhanced, there's this idealized like experience of that, um, because it's different. It's this third place. Um, so there's definitely that when you travel, or you go on vacation, where there's an you tend to feel like you're at your best. You tend to feel that, and this idea also doesn't have to include only travel. It can also include like the movie theater.
Yeah.
It could include a bar, a bookstore. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
other places that you're going to that are separate from your home and separate from, um, your home is your everyday, and then there's also work, which is like you have to be there, but at the most basic, right? Like people, depending on what level you love or fucking hate or dislike or like or whatever your job, um, it's another place that you end up getting more joy from because it's more a sense of like a life outside of the norm. Um, when you travel, yeah, you whether that's considered traveling, tourism, vacationing, whatever it is, whether you're at some fucking resort where you don't need it, or you're backpacking or whatever the fuck you're doing, it tends to seem more interesting. You tend to seem like I'm at my best. This is like You're also, if you're that person to begin with, that means you're going to, especially like the traveling type versus the resort type, like you're not trying to reproduce the best things in the United States or whatever, like these first class experiences, like, but just somewhere else.
Yeah.
Behind walls, you're out there, so you're trying to basically learn how other people are living. So you're more open. You're more now. You may face that when you're in a place that doesn't have like these so-called first world um, amenities or whatever. So like, yeah, there are lines or there aren't lines, or you know what I mean, or crazy traffic, crazy driving, delays. Maybe the bathrooms are not, they're not fucking like bathrooms here, or the food. Maybe you're like, the food is good, but like, oh, whoa, doesn't look like it's fucking like refrigerated fucking like below 40 degrees, and that's danger zone. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, all that. If you're going to move somewhere, obviously you're going to have to, there are things that you don't know about that are negative to the culture that, that you're going to experience. You have to be open to that.
Yeah.
The slow movement comes out of people. I don't remember if it was Starbucks or McDonald's or both, but in Italy, it was like this response to like these fast food American elements that were making their way into the culture. And so like locals were kind of like, no, fuck this. Like, we don't want fucking this shit here. Like, we have a coffee culture here. We have a food culture here. Food cultures here, depending on the region. Like, don't bring us your fucking bullshit. And I haven't had Starbucks or McDonald's since the whole Gaza thing, since that's like I've abstained from that. Not that I'm oh my god, I'm doing playing this big old part. I'm just boycotting those particular things. And I don't miss it. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that I can see why Crumb has this. There's a scene where he's outside and he's seeing all these people walk by, and he's like, everybody has a fucking billboard basically on their clothes. Yeah. They're advertising all these things, and it's interesting because logos, branding, and all that. That's a form of art. It is a form of setting up these symbols that represent things and using color and placement and all that. So it's interesting for an artist to have such a fucking like visceral reaction to that. Obviously the intention is different when you're expressing your inner fucking like urges versus you're creating something that's going to attract attention, that's going to create meaning for, okay, this means this. So now an apple with a bite taken out of it means whatever you take Apple to mean. It means Steve Jobs, think different, all that shit that we think about. All that meaning. He's criticizing that. I look at Crumb and I see this client that I used to have, a longtime client, my main client. Mm-hmm. He was a writer, historian. He was a good cook. He was like vegetarian, anti-fucking technology, very eccentric, very like insisted that I fucking turned off my phone because I would work with him as doing editing work and research and shit and writing and all this stuff. And we would meet at the Central Library. Later on, we would like I don't think we became friends, but like we worked together for years. So we would work even on park benches, on the at his house, at the Central Library, different places all over LA. Like when we were writing about LA and different shit. Yeah. Grand Central Market. very eccentric, very having his particular view of the world laid out on top of the world, so that it was like he was imposing his view, and it was very critical, and no room for the opposing side, no room for like, well, this is the counter argument to what I'm saying. It wasn't that. It was very much like, this is how I see it, and so this is how it is. And Crumb kind of has that. And so I could see, this is circling back around to him wanting to leave, or being willing to like leave. But those kind of people, and any kind of person, anyway, you're going to have some kind of negative something, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I could see him just exchanging all the shit that he talks about the United States for now shit that he's going to talk about France. And at that point, he's just going to retreat to the big-legged women of France. You know what I mean? Like, and the French way of piggyback rides. You know what I mean? Like, versus the American way. So it's bizarre, but at the same time, it kind of like, it makes sense. I mean, he's in the middle of this move. He's in the middle of this thing. He has to leave his family, which he already like has a distance from them. It's an interesting fucking documentary. It's kind of like, where do you put this guy?
I think it's one of the most fascinating documentaries I've ever watched. I think it's one of the best documentaries, which makes it one of the greatest films. I put it up there with Earl Morris's work, and you know how, and everybody who listens to this show knows the high regard I have for Earl Morris. When you sit back and you let somebody tell their lives in the way that McNamara is very forthcoming with The Fog of War, or where Rumsfeld is so protective but showboating in The Unknown Known. There is an ability to just sit there and point the camera and capture things, and ask the questions, but there's something about the way a person answers where you sit there and you say, well, this person is telling the truth or this person is lying. And each one of those things gives you an insight into who the subject is. With McNamara, you get the feeling that he's trying to make sense of the horrible things that he's done. Rumsfeld is completely sold out to
his own semantics.
Yeah. I mean, he's all right being the scumbag that he is. I don't know if he realizes it. With Crumb, it's different, because Crumb makes me feel like he's a guy that knows he's an outsider. He knows that he doesn't fit in. He wants some kind of human connection, but he knows that he's incapable of it. The really interesting thing about it is sitting there and talking with both Maxon and Charles, you get the impression that Robert Crumb, and I'm just totally, I might be laying this onto his character based on what I see and how I would react to a situation. I get the sense that he understands that this is about as good as it's going to get for him, because the only alternative is so much worse. Like
elaborate.
Because what I'm saying is that his obsessions and his fetishes are manageable, and he's okay being that and who he is, because he's functional in his obsessiveness. Whereas his brother is an agoraphobic, and his older brother is an agoraphobic, living in a house with his mother. And Robert Crumb says he's never had sex. He's never been with a woman. There's a sadness to that. Whereas with Maxon, this is a guy that is basically keeping his demons at bay as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in a through a spiritual deep dive to control that molesting urge and to keep the epilepsy. I don't know if it's epilepsy, but the fits at bay.
Yeah.
Also with Charles, you talk about deflection and laughing at it, but it's that idea that he was aware. He had the misfortune to be aware of how fucked up he is. He knows that it wasn't right, that he wanted to commit the violence that was in him. Whatever it was, he was hearing a voice telling him to smash his middle brother's head in, and he was somehow able to ignore
even
it.
if it wasn't a literal voice.
Yeah. But you definitely know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's a strange film, and it's weird because it profiles these people so honestly and so. I feel like these three men are incapable of lying about themselves. Like, they're not putting up a front. They're not trying to excuse who they are. They're not going out of their way to make themselves look better. They're not deep diving into how horrible they are. They're just somehow living with the pain of being themselves. I find it both sad and intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, there's one comic where Robert Crumb, I don't remember the name of this character, but it's this bearded character that I guess is one of his like regulars.
I think it's called Mr. Nobody or something, or Mr. Nowhere or something.
I don't remember. I don't remember. And it's this bald, like bearded old man.
Yeah.
And that guy presents his friend with a woman who has basically a detachable head.
Yeah.
And she's got a big body, but she has a detachable head, and you can just unscrew the head and like just put a cap.
Put a mannequin's head on it as well.
So no, I think it's she's headless, but when you take her outside, you put a mannequin's head on. That's what it is. So people think that this woman has a head, and so of course this friend or whatever takes the head off and just uses her for sex. But there's a problem because the mannequin head accidentally gets smashed. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fantasy. It's this fantasy of just using a woman's body, right? But there was this weird little, like, it sparked at what you said is about like this, to you, what seems is like this inability to kind of like want to hide some of that. He's showing these poses that this headless woman is in the drawing. And he's like, I got these poses. And I just fucking, I lost it because it was just so specific and so like, it was so time specific. So of its time. He's like, he's doing these drawings and he's showing you the drawings that he had done of this headless woman in these different postures, like basically like almost like twerking at certain points. And he's like, I got these poses from freeze framing the Fly Girls from In Living Color.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And it was just so specific and so kind of like, you have to have been alive to know In Living Color, to remember In Living Color, how ridiculous it was. how very 90s it was, and it's just these little specific things that it's like you can't make this shit up. From that to rolling a bullet like if it were a pair of dice in your hand, while you're talking about fucking like assaulting someone just in this kind of offhanded way, but also you sit on a bed of nails and you pass a string through your body every few weeks or every few months or whatever it is. Just these things that it's kind of like, this is a documentary. This is not a fucking, this is not fiction. This is a documentary. And even if some of these things were tall tales told by these characters, which I don't think any of them are, it's so fucking weird and it's so unique that it's kind of like it really, it makes you look at like the specificity of it makes you look at the universality of it, where it's like, yeah, we all have these fucking quirks. Earlier, because if I mention Leslie, you know Leslie, so you can picture her telling a story, or you can picture her being funny or whatever, and then it makes you laugh, and you're like, she makes me laugh. And the other day we had a party, and she was telling a story, but the way she was telling it was kind of fucked up, but it was like very endearing, and it was about someone that she cares about, but it was like in the telling of it, it was fucked up. And she's just telling it like kind of offhand, and one of my friends, he's just fucking dying because of how fucked up like the words that she's using and shit like that. But she doesn't mean it to be fucked up. She's just like, it's just the way that we tell things. It's the way that things happen. And it's these little specific things that, like, I guess that's what works also in comedy, is like the way that you tell a bit or a joke on stage, but it's so wrapped in the specifics of it, that it somehow gets to something that affects everyone. This truth, or this weird thing that makes you go, that's true.
Well, wait a minute. I got to scramble there. What did you? Something in comedy, and there's something in the truth in it, and what? There's
something in that happens in those moments where you hear something that you have no choice but to laugh, and through your laughter you're going, fuck, that's right, that's true, fuck, that's so true. Even though it's maybe about this certain person, Chuck Palahniuk, the writer of Fight Club. I'm kind of going through like as many interviews online that many podcasts, and including fucking Joe Rogan, that he can do, because he's really an interesting storyteller, like not only in terms of his writing, but as an actual storyteller in interviews. If you ever get a chance, listen to the story of how his father was murdered. Wow. It's a great story. It's fucked up, but it's a great story. Just the way he constructs the story in the telling of it is great. But yeah, I recommend listening to his interviews. Anyway, these things are so unique and so, like, they don't seem real.
Yeah.
But they are real, and they're so unique that it's kind of like, oh, wow. And he says that he loves collecting stories from people, because he'll go to a party or some event or something, and he'll tell a story, and that his story will spark someone else's story, where they try to basically like outdo
Mm-hmm.
the story, but it's not necessarily like they're trying to outdo. They're just like, oh, like no, get this. Like I have a crazier fucking story about a fucking zeppelin that landed in my front yard. Um, so in '85, and then they go into it, and it kind of like, or he talks about in a certain period, up to a certain period, everyone had a story of finding a bag of porn, like whether it was in the forest. He
Mm-hmm.
talks about it like in the woods. I found one in the alley, um, and then it becomes that where it's kind of like it starts off in one way, but then it's like people are like, well, yeah, well, actually, mine was behind the dumpster behind Burger King or whatever. Um, and then it leads to more things. What I'm getting at is that this documentary is like that because it's so fucking unique. It's so,
Mm-hmm.
these people are so fucked up, but it leads back to something larger. It leads back to like, well, what would your comic books be about if you
Well,
were
see,
that guy?
that's the interesting thing about it is that these people are so fucked up, but but what is fucked up about them is not unique. There's a lot of trauma out there. There's a lot of people who have dealt with physical, psychological, sexual abuse, and have always felt like outsiders. I mean, look at Robert Crumb. He can't weigh more than about 145 pounds with fucking Coke bottle glasses. I mean, he's the ultimate geek. And then and then to go out of his way to dress himself up like he's living in the 1940s. I mean, and I like that. Except for that straw
Yeah,
hat, I like the way he dresses. That says a lot about me. But as I watch this, I think to myself, he's lucky. And
yeah,
the two
yeah,
brothers are very fortunate, as fucked up as they are, that they also have passions. Because think about how many people you run into on a daily basis who are just fucked up, but don't have an outlet. They don't have, they can't write about it. They can't perform. They can't sing. They can't draw. They can't act. There is no way to get it out of them. Robert Crumb had a gift, has a gift, and he utilizes it in order to, I don't know, in order to keep the demons at bay or to uh, um, make them serve a purpose for whatever he's trying to create.
hmm,
I find that incredibly powerful. I look at this guy and I marvel at how he is able to take his fetishes, his sexual proclivities as he describes them, his 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 discomfort with society as a whole, and he's able to create these stories. Now, whether you view them as racist or misogynistic, which I think you could make an argument for both of those things, but I also come from the comic standpoint of if you're saying it's something that's so fucked up and so extreme, how can you take it seriously? That's always been my take on it. If you say something that is that fucked up, I find it hard to imagine that the person doesn't know it's fucked up and is doing it as a joke. If your sensitivity level is so great that you can't deal with it, that's your problem, not his. But I mean, there are elements that you wonder, is this a guy that hates women? But he also says, I guess I do. No, he didn't say I guess. I do have problems with women. Um, but he's able to present them in these stories that he creates. He's able to create these worlds, and I think it's incredibly fortunate for him and for those of for those out there that suffer from the same types of uh, either mental issues or attitudes, cultural attitudes, it's interesting to have somebody out there who could give voice to it and in some ways temper the attitudes, the difficult attitudes that you might have. And for Terry Zwigoff, because this could not have been an easy sell. And this movie is the success it is because somehow it managed to find an audience, which is in a large part was because of Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. That's, 1994. I think Gene Siskel called this the best film in 1994, and Roger Ebert called it the second best film in 1994. So they championed the fucking. I'm looking. I'm going to try to look that up, but I don't know what he called the best film in 1994.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Yeah.
But it's Terry Zwigoff would go on to make, I think, 3 or 4 more films. Ghost World, which is really good.
Yeah, with Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi and Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson.
He likes people playing records of the blues.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he digs that. He's going to tell my life story one day. We're going to see how that works out. Although he's going to fucking shun me because it's all on CD. But Art School Confidential. But I think he's best known for Bad Santa, which it's a movie. Bad Santa is just on another level of depravity.
Mm.
You've seen it, correct?
No, I've never seen it.
You've never seen Bad Santa?
Never.
We got to make time. We really do got to make time because but you know what? I'm going to have to go out there or you're going to have to come out here because you kind of need me there.
Okay. I see.
It's a hell of a movie. It's incredible. I think it's great. But he his filmmaking is too personal, I think. And even with something like Bad Santa, it's too much. Sometimes the humor, because this is a very funny movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
This film is a little bit too difficult for most people. I don't think most people want to know that people like this exist.
I mean, yeah, just on the basic level, it's just like, oh, these people gross me out, or these people are weird, or these people are it's the judgment that I admitted to, where I'm just kind of like, I mean, how fucked up is that? That it's kind of like I was like, yeah, I'm not going to eat while I watch this documentary because, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's that's the distance that we're putting between ourselves and them. You know what I mean? And so it's like that's like super fucked up.
There was one day that I was riding on the bus in LA, and there was a man on the bus in a gray tweed sports coat, baby blue pajama bottoms, and slippers, and he was reading a Penthouse magazine. Yeah. And I thought of Charles Crumb almost instantly. He looked like him. It looked like, I was like, wow. I think this is about as much as Charles Crumb would be able to pull it together enough to be. It was fucked up. But, you said something once that made me fucking scream, where you said it in a text. I'm on the bus looking at all of humanity. I was just laughing my ass off because, that's what it is. In 1994, this film came out, and Roger Ebert called it the second best film of the year. The best film of the year was Leaving Las Vegas, in his view. Another excessive, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is this is it's a difficult watch in a very different way than other films that we've discussed, and than any other film that we've discussed in this December look at dark films. Crash. God, what else did we do?
We did Crash. We did this. We've done Irreversible,
Mhm.
which I
Which
think
will come out. Yeah,
after this. American Psycho.
Mhm.
We did Network.
Yeah.
Um,
we did Revenge and
oh yeah,
the Demi Moore, The Substance. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but more than this just being a documentary, this is real. And it's there are Charles Crumb took his own life, but there are thousands upon thousands of Charles Crumbs in this world.
mm-hmm.
And shit, every neighborhood has one.
Yeah.
Every neighborhood has a middle-aged to old man living with his mother in a house, and nobody really sees them.
Right.
I don't think you can get away from that. It's disturbing. It's sad. It instills fear in you because it's like the old Tom Waits song. What's going on in there? You know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's. I think the beauty of this film is that it's not exploitative, and it doesn't demonize. It just wants you to understand who these people are and build a certain level of sympathy and empathy. But know that there's something in art that can validate it and make it powerful. You see the fallen bodies, and then you see somebody like Crumb. Like, you see the three Crumb brothers, and you see how badly it can go. And you see how one can really take advantage of the whole thing and elevate himself. But he's never above it.
I mean, it's luck. Part of it is just luck. That I mean, how many people can move to fucking France because of their drawings?
Yeah.
And be that person who's drawing those things.
Yeah.
It's yeah, that gives you some level of hope that it's like, well, there's a place for my weird shit, or there, you know what I mean? Like,
but it's also a matter of there's a passion and a commitment to the art, because he won't sell out. He, and I mean, you can call that whatever you want, but there is a respect for his art and an understanding that he has to respect his own talent to the degree that it makes it possible for him to do it. The Keep on Truckin' thing, the Janis Joplin, the fucking the Fritz the Cat, all of these things that he hates because they're associated with him, and they're the most obvious things that don't truly reflect his personality and his attitudes. If you've, when they talk about his depiction of African American characters, these black images that he's created, the cartoons are very much stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the worst type of stereotypes. But if you look at his drawings of, he put out a collection. I don't know if he put it out or somebody else took the pictures that he drew and put out a collection. But they were kind of like trading cards of I guess, pre-war blues artists. Charlie Patton.
Yeah,
You've seen that, right?
yeah. He did.
He
He
did
did
Robert
the
Johnson. He did Charlie
yeah
Patton.
two photos that existed
Hmm.
at that time or
Yeah.
whatever.
He did Blind John Estes, Blind Willie McTell. I mean, they are incredibly intricate and beautifully rendered recreations of the photographs. They're incredible. They're really. I would love to have a few of them to hang them on the walls. And you know the shit that I hang on my walls. So that's what I that there's
Dead black
yeah,
musicians.
exactly. Most of them are on most of them are that are on the wall. So he there's a respect. That's not to say that oh he does that and that excuses the other shit. But I think the other shit is so I think Nigger Hearts is so extreme that if you're at least open-minded about it, you see that it's comical and it's a commentary on consumerism and the stereotypical depiction of black people in this country. If you're going to just be held up, if you're just going to hold up on the ugliness of it, though, you're never going to get the point. I might be wrong, though. He might be a raging racist. I don't know. He's difficult.
Yeah,
He's complicated. Yeah. You know?
He is complicated.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. That's the show.
That is.
buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. This episode is dedicated to Alan Lamberg, a member. Thank you for your support. All of you who have supported, who will continue to support. Thanks a lot. Keep it crumb. Keep it weird. Keep it big-legged. Goodbye.